There are some problems here. Sorry, big time.
I'm so upset. Oh my God.
Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian with you guys. We're gonna do an amazing show for you guys. You crazy, dog? We have a lot of strange conversations and debates in American politics these days. It's not as strange if you've been watching the Young Turks. You know that these schisms and disagreements are abound in the Republican Party and in the right wing. But Tucker Carlson versus Bari Weiss, Steve Bannon versus Elon Musk, Megyn Kelly versus conservative women. That's all in the show today. And that's just one day. So fascinating stuff, but also some foreign policy as well. So Casper, what are we starting with?
I actually want to start with that foreign policy because, in this, pattern or trend of conflicts, looks like there's a little bit of Trump administration versus Volodymyr Zelensky. So let's get into it. President Donald Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Saudi Arabia today, much to the chagrin of the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who very much wants to be part of peace negotiations in order to end the ongoing war in Ukraine. Now, I'm gonna get to what Trump and Putin are allegedly working toward outside of a potential peace agreement with Ukraine. But before I get to that, I do think it's important to really hyper focus on some of what Donald Trump had to say, which really does have Volodymyr Zelensky furious with the Trump administration, feeling alienated and abandoned by America. Our European allies are also very much concerned about some of these statements. But apparently Trump said or implied that the war is partly Ukraine's fault. He said this, and I'm quoting verbatim, "You should have never started it," Trump said of Ukraine while criticizing President Volodymyr Zelensky, who had expressed concern that his country was not included in talks between the United States and Russia in Saudi Arabia. Trump continues by saying, "I think I have the power to end this war, and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited," essentially referring to Volodymyr Zelensky. And then he continues, "Well, you've been there for 3 years," Trump told reporters at Mar-a-Lago. "You should have never started it. You could have made a deal." Trump also went on to argue that he could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land that's now essentially, at the heart of this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And he continues to say everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down, but they chose not to do it that way. Now, if you can recall, early on in this war, which began in February of 2022, the then Prime Minister of UK, Boris Johnson, had met with Volodymyr Zelensky, essentially discouraging him from engaging in peace talks. And the reason for that is that the West wanted to essentially have Russia expend their military capability, essentially bleed out their military capability through the course of this war. But there has been a price to pay for Ukrainians, of course, in having this war drag on. And in the beginning, Vladimir Putin was under the assumption that this was an easy war to win. It was not easy. In the very beginning, he was having a lot of difficulty. His military was having a lot of difficulty. And so he was in more of a position to agree to peace talks back then But as the war kind of heated up and Russia was able to secure more and more territory in Ukraine, he was less incentivized to engage in peace negotiations. Now Donald Trump is involved, and it's clear to me that there are certain business negotiations taking place, and I'll give you some more details on that in just a moment, Cenk. But first, I wanted to get your thoughts on what he had to say about Ukraine partly being responsible for this war.
Yeah, so that's enormously unfair. The people responsible for a war, the people who started, and so and continued it, and are more powerful and taking land, et cetera, et cetera. So in this case, there's no question the Russians started it. We've been over this 100 times on the Young Turks. Did Biden and the US make mistakes that partially led up to the war? I think they did. I think talking about Ukraine being in NATO further antagonized Russia, et cetera. But at the end, they said that they wouldn't be in NATO and Russia attacked anyway. So not helpful. In the beginning, when Trump first took office, I was slightly encouraged, Anna, because he didn't immediately give away the whole deal to the Russians, and it looked like he was actually going to negotiate, and he was going to even threaten them a little bit. So I'm not in the camp of don't talk to Putin by yourself and exclude the Russians. I'm saying the Ukrainians and the Europeans. I don't really care how peace talks start as long as they talk. So there's also some encouraging things because that has begun, and they come out saying that they're more likely to reach an agreement. But part of the reason they're more likely to reach an agreement is because that initial, credit to Trump for seeming a little bit more unbiased is now quickly dissipating as he's going around, him and his administration, saying basically Russia was right about everything. That's not at all helpful to the negotiations. So, and now I'm very worried about the Ukrainians.
Yeah, so all of this is kind of coming into focus for me. And so I'm gonna take a step back and give you all the broader picture in just a minute. But in regard to the conversations between Donald Trump and Putin in Saudi Arabia, they actually didn't focus the majority of their talks on ending the war in Ukraine. Obviously, that was one of the topics, but it was essentially a way of opening up diplomatic avenues in which additional negotiations and talks centered on a peace deal will take place. So in an interview with the Associated Press after the meeting, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the two sides agreed broadly to pursue 3 specific goals. That includes restoring staffing at their respective embassies in Washington and Moscow, of course, to create a high-level team to support Ukraine peace talks and to explore closer relations, and this is important, economic cooperation. So look, if you're super Trump deranged, you're immediately gonna think about Trump's personal business deals. But I actually think this is more about what his policy goals are in regard to the economy. So earlier this month, I had done a story about how one of Donald Trump's avenues to lower inflation was to encourage Saudi Arabia to increase their oil production. If there's more oil supply, the idea is that's going to bring oil prices down. That's going to translate to lower prices when it comes to goods and services because of transport and all of that. But Saudi Arabia is like, nah, bro, we're not going to do that because the more oil they produce, the cheaper oil is, the more their economy suffers. Now, let's not forget that the ongoing war in Ukraine has had an impact on inflation. Ukraine is known as the bread bowl of the world. And so when that war started, that's when inflation really started to tick up. And in addition to that, remember, because of the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States slapped some pretty significant sanctions against Russia. I think that Donald Trump is now seeing Russia as a potential player in his efforts in lowering inflation. Essentially, remove the sanctions after there's a peace deal at play, have them produce oil. Once you get rid of those sanctions, that oil is more available on the economic global market. And I think that's what this is really about. I think he is seeing Russia as a tool to lower inflation. So people stop bugging him about the fact that he didn't lower inflation on day one, which was a ridiculous promise to make. That's my read of it. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good take on it and accurate. And remember, one of his giant campaign promises was drill baby drill is going to lead to lower prices. Now he's authorized drill baby drill to no end, and it doesn't really matter because Obama and Biden had broken records on how much they allowed drilling anyway. So it's not like he had that much to add. But that was never going to work, and we've always said that it was never going to work. It's certainly not related to the price of eggs, and it's not even related to the price of oil in the world market because we're only one country. Aha! But when you involve Saudi Arabia, the Russians, and all of OPEC, then you can affect the worldwide oil market and bring down gas prices, and then pretend that your drill baby drill policy is what led to it, open up more federal land for your donors to ravage and then not give anything back to the American people on, et cetera, et cetera. So it checks off a lot of boxes for him. And the only downside is he has to probably throw Ukraine under the bus, which I don't think he cares about it at all.
I agree, actually, about that. I don't think he cares all that much about Ukraine. I think, look, fact of the matter is Ukraine doesn't really have much leverage. So Volodymyr Zelensky is furious. He's furious for good reason. He feels that he's been kind of blocked out of peace negotiations. Secretary of State Marco Rubio argues that is not the case. We're just having initial conversations to reestablish diplomatic ties with Russia. And of course, at the end of the day, Ukraine will be involved in peace negotiations. But nonetheless, unfortunately for Zelensky and Ukraine, they really do need US military support in order to continue with the war. So this is gonna pressure Zelensky to come to the table, number one, but also it's gonna probably pressure Zelensky to accept a deal that he doesn't like. That's my prediction. I hope I'm wrong about that. But considering which players in this whole equation have the leverage, I think Ukraine is probably gonna end up accepting a deal they don't like.
Yeah, let me just give last word to a couple of our members on Twitch. So Yayboy07 said, Ukraine is 0.00% responsible for this war. I largely agree with that. If anyone was responsible outside of Russia, I'd put it on more of the Western nations that pushed forward, including the US. And I don't know why Biden seemed to signal that a minor incursion would be okay. That was, and it literally might have been that he has dementia. And so I think there's a tiny bit of responsibility. I don't know about even know about tiny bit, but some responsibility on the West and America in general. But Ukraine has been the victim throughout in all of this.
Right.
And No Math Dragon doubled down on their earlier suggestion, which I really liked when we were discussing this about a week ago. Give Ukraine their nukes, at least as a bargaining chip, but that isn't Trump's plan. So if you really wanted to do the right thing here, not just for the Ukrainians, but for us, for everyone involved, and especially for peace, you would negotiate as hard as possible right now with the Russians, and you'd ask for as good a deal as you can get for the Ukrainians and for us, right? And maybe that deal, not maybe, certainly that deal would not be perfect. And there's a lot that the Ukrainians would really hate about that deal because it would involve a compromise involving land. And that's so fundamentally unfair to the Ukrainians. But that's what a peace negotiation would look like. That's why I like that member's comment and suggestion, because I wouldn't want Ukraine to get their nukes back, but I would want to use it as leverage because it's a rare thing that can create leverage. Now, without that kind of leverage, it looks like Trump is giving away the store. I don't know that he even wanted the leverage, to be honest, but he's back to, okay, something for us, something for the Russians, Ukrainians and Europe, not so much.
Yeah, and look, I'll end on this. The way this is playing out for Ukraine really does discourage other nuclear powers from denuclearizing, which Donald Trump claims is one of his policy goals. He claims that he wants to get other countries to, including the United States, by the way, to denuclearize. Now, whether you believe him on wanting to accomplish that goal or not is beside the point. Let's just assume, for the sake of this conversation, that he's serious about it, that he's sincere about it. Any country who goes along with a US deal to denuclearize would be crazy considering what has just happened with Ukraine. So we'll see how this all plays out, but obviously we're staying on the story. We'll give you more details as it develops, but that's what we've got for now. All right, let's move on to some domestic news, starting with this.
Elon Musk has got to go.
Overnight, protests popping up in cities across the country.
Where is Congress?
Hundreds demonstrating against President Trump and Elon Musk as they push forward with changes to shrink the size of the federal government.
President Trump has directed Elon Musk and the Doge team to identify fraud at the Social Security Administration.
If you think there's fraud, then why did you fire all the inspector generals?
Well, Michelle King, the acting commissioner of the Social Security Administration, has now officially left her post. She did so over the weekend after clashing with Elon Musk's Doge. Now, this conflict between Doge and Michelle King, who's actually been with the agency since 1994, arose out of the fact that Doge members are attempting to access sensitive government records that the Social Security Administration contains. Now, the Trump administration officials argue that they absolutely need to access this personal and incredibly private data to root out wasteful, or erroneous spending at the Social Security Administration. They're concerned about fraud, but it's unclear which data the Musk associates wanted to access that specifically spurred King's departure. But I want to be clear, when we're talking about the Social Security Administration, we are in fact talking about deeply personal details and information about Americans. Yes, that includes things like where they live, their bank account information, Social Security numbers. But more importantly, think about what the Social Security Administration does. People apply if they're disabled to get, Social Security disability benefits, which means that they have comprehensive medical records for those who applied for said benefits. Also includes records on what people earn and more. And look, this isn't the first time this has happened. This is a story we've been reporting on in regard to other federal government agencies. For instance, the Treasury Department's highest ranking civil servant resigned after refusing to grant Doge access to the Bureau of the Fiscal Service. And Doge is also seeking to access IRS data in addition to what they're trying to access at the Social Security Administration and the Treasury Department. But this issue just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And this is what I want to ask, Cenk. I want to know if there are people who support Donald Trump who acknowledge, yes, you can pursue waste, fraud, and abuse without this process that really does lack transparency, right? Without allowing these random people who have been appointed by Elon Musk, who hasn't been elected, who isn't an official government employee, like have them look at all of our private information. I mean, you've gotta feel somewhat uncomfortable about that. But, I think there's so much distrust toward our institutions that Trump supporters are just kind of going along with it without really thinking about the ramifications of these random people having access to our private information.
Most people still have binary brain, which is if Doge and Musk and Trump are on our side and they hate the Democrats and the libs and the thought police and all that stuff, they must be good guys because it's a binary world. It's either 0 or 1. So we can trust them with all of our private information. No, we can't. We can't trust anybody with that kind of information. And most importantly, they don't need it at all. So this is the thing I keep coming back to, and I'm really frustrated the reporters aren't focusing on this, and that no one on the right-wing side, the Doge side, et cetera, has any answers for this. Why do you need that information? You already have access to all the budgets. So if you want to see what went wrong in the budgeting, if you want to see where the waste, fraud, and abuse is, you don't need access to people's Social Security numbers at all. You don't need access to their bank account information as they want through the IRS and Social Security and other agencies. You don't need any of this private information about both American citizens and now Elon Musk is talking about, or a reporter at 60 Minutes reported something in a way I didn't like. I want that person arrested.
That's crazy.
Okay,
that's crazy.
It's absolutely nuts. So by the way, now he will have that person and everybody at 60 Minutes, all of their private information, their taxes, their bank account information, their Social Security, if he gets access to all these things. What do you need that for? If there's waste, fraud, and abuse, it's in the freaking budget and you have complete access to it. They don't need this information at all unless they're planning to do something nefarious with it. I literally don't know a single good reason why they should have it. If I was going to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, number one, I would love to do that. I wouldn't ask for this information. I would, if they gave me this information, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I'd be like, what are you wasting my time with this for? We need to actually find the programs that are being spent in the wrong direction. How does having Bob's social security number, or oh, look at that, conveniently, all of my competitors' financial information have anything to do with actually cutting waste, fraud, and abuse? And Amy Klobuchar with a rare good point there. If you're worried about fraud, why did you get rid of the people who's in charge of getting rid of fraud and looking out for fraud, the inspector generals and the abuse and all of that? That's literally their job. I mean, at a bare minimum, you might want to talk to them before you get rid of them. Hey, what did you guys come up with anything? What are you what are you seeing? What were you working on? I would ask that question if it was a Trump person or a Biden person that was an inspector general. And I certainly wouldn't fire the inspector generals that are looking at my work, which then gets to the other point that you were referring to, Anna, which is transparency. So now, as we'll talk about in a different story, Musk is saying, and the government is saying that, no, Musk is technically not an employee. So what, and Doge is technically not anything. We just made it up, even though it is now in charge of the entire government. And so you won't be able to get a freedom of information request or any other kind of transparency that you would get from a normal government department. So wait a minute. I thought you guys wanted more transparency. Now all of a sudden you want to fire any other watchdog, anyone who might be looking into what you're asking for, ask for the most private, sensitive information the government has, and then say you want no transparency for what you're doing. No, red flag, red flag, red flag. This is a giant problem. And if Elon thinks he's gonna do something monumentally stupid and get away with it, I think he's very wrong. And that will lead to a crash for not just Elon, but for Trump and MAGA and everyone beyond imagination. And they can get all mad that they want in the deep state and all that stuff. Look, there's so many different things that can go wrong. You miss one social security payment for the American people, and you're gonna have rage like you've never seen before. And now this is on the normal end. This is on the normal end.
I don't know. I disagree. I totally disagree.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just think for certain people in the United States of America, regardless of which political party is in charge, if you hit a certain level of wealth, you get away with everything. So I don't think there will ever be consequences for Elon Musk if he does in fact disrupt the system to the point where individuals who are entitled to Social Security benefits don't get their payments because of how disruptive Elon Musk is, right? Or because of the fact that there's no real method to this madness. Let me just say, look, I don't know what kind of data individuals would need access to in order to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. Okay, so I just want to put that aside for a second. But I do have a problem with the lack of transparency. I have a problem with the fact that, when it comes to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Elon Musk is like, I'm gonna be transparent about why we're getting rid of it. I'm gonna share the receipts soon. He was supposed to share the receipts on Valentine's Day. He didn't. Then he said he was gonna share the receipts over the weekend. He didn't. And so, I mean, if he came out and explained, this is why we need access to this information, here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing it methodically to ensure that innocent people who are doing nothing wrong and are entitled to Social Security payments are still getting the payments. He's not doing any of that. He's essentially regurgitating nonsense that people are tweeting to him without fact checking it. So that doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence in what he's doing. And by the way, there absolutely is waste, fraud, and abuse, 100%. So I'm not even against what the mission is. I'm against the fact that there's lack of transparency, a guy who is extremely wealthy, has multiple businesses, and those conflicts of interest really do play a role in regard to why it's problematic that he's trying to access this data in the first place. I mean, we're not just talking about Social Security numbers. We're not just talking about bank account numbers. He's also, through the Treasury, going to have access to information regarding other businesses, potentially businesses he competes with, nonprofits, things like that. And so there isn't transparency. Just because he's constantly on Twitter tweeting things doesn't mean he's being transparent. Visibility does not translate to transparency. Transparency is transparency. Tell us why you need this data, how you're going to utilize this data, and explain to us what it is exactly that you found so fraudulent about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And if you're going to promise the receipts and not deliver them, obviously that's going to raise a lot of questions. The other thing I'll just say is, Cenk, we live in a country where the government is specifically there to serve neoliberal interests, okay? And Elon Musk is a perfect example of that. So the idea that our government eventually is going to punish a guy who's using his position of power in order to benefit himself, enrich himself, and potentially screw over Americans who are entitled to certain things like Social Security benefits, it's just outlandish to me to even believe that at this point. That's how pessimistic I am that anyone with the kind of wealth that Elon Musk has would ever pay any consequence for bad behavior.
Yeah, let me make the case then. Because I understand what you're saying. I mean, you're not wrong to have that pessimistic look if you look at what's happened in America until now. And in fact, today I heard that Elon Musk is going to start spending in Democratic primaries. I get a load of this to help corporate Democrats. Gee, I wonder why. I thought he was against the uniparty. No, and the minute he starts buying the corporate Democrats, the entire Democratic Party and their leadership will become Elon Musk fans, because they have no morals at all. So if you say, well, Cenk, that sounds a bit much, that sounds outlandish. No, this already happened. Remember, the crypto guys spent tons of money in Democratic primaries, all on behalf of corporate Democrats and against populists, against anti-corruption, because it was the whole point of the project was corruption. And the Democratic Party was like, we love crypto now. Crypto's awesome. What do you need? We're here to kiss your ass. So I understand exactly the point you're making. The minute Elon starts spending $1 in Democratic primaries in favor of the establishment Democrats, they'll say, Elon's not so bad, Elon's not so bad, right? That's what they'll start saying. So now here's my counterpoint. Look, media now is greatly fragmented. It wasn't before. There's only two sides. In the beginning, there was only one side, Walter Cronkite, period. And it was everybody believed the same things, was created the same culture, et cetera. Then it became Fox News versus MSNBC / mainstream media, right? But still only talking points allowed on both sides. Then online media starts, we happen, et cetera. We're now supporting Bernie and progressives and populists, et cetera. Things start to happen. Now, it's so fragmented, the media. So now the right wing is getting information from a variety of different sources, and so are the left wing, okay? So now Steve Bannon said 3 things recently about Elon Musk, and he's back to all-out war against Elon Musk. He said, first, where are the goddamn cuts? I heard about Doge, cut, and obviously Bannon wants to cut. And he's like, I haven't seen them cross the Potomac. He's like, I thought you guys were gonna do Pentagon cuts. I haven't seen a single cut in the Pentagon. I've barely seen any cuts. And then Elon Musk goes, oh, well, there's $50 million in condoms. Oh, right, and then at the Oval Office, he admits, yeah, we made that one up. Oops. So where are the cuts? No,
let me give you his actual statement.
All right, go ahead.
So this is what he said. I want to give you Steve Bannon's statement verbatim. So this was during an interview with Unheard, where he says that Musk is a parasitic illegal immigrant. He wants to impose his freak experiments and act as God without any respect for the country's history, values, or traditions. So in that statement, Bannon was alleging that Elon Musk actually came to the country and overstayed his visa. This is something that Musk denies. I don't care enough to look into it, to be honest with you. But he continues, it's pretty evident the president's using him as an armor-piercing shell that's delivering blunt force trauma against the administrative state, Bannon said in his interview. But he also described Musk's work as performative and complained that Musk had not focused on the Pentagon, with which Musk's private companies have many contracts. Okay, take it away, Cenk.
Yeah, so secondly, in a previous statement, Bannon had talked about, you guys are talking about cutting Medicaid. No, wrong place. He's like, tons of real Americans, MAGA voters get Medicaid. Do not cut Medicaid. But they're gonna cut Medicaid. They're gonna cut in all of the wrong places. Why? And you're not gonna see a single dollar of it, because it's all for corporate tax cuts. I wrote that on social media today. an interesting MAGA reaction. They don't even realize that's the plan. They think that these cuts are actually going to help taxpayers. Whatever cuts have actually happened. They have access to all of our information. That's mission accomplished. The cuts haven't really happened, and not a dollar from the Pentagon. Okay, so but where's that money going? It's going to go to literally all of it, and it won't be anywhere near enough for new corporate tax cuts for Elon Musk and his Silicon Valley CEO friends who are now all Doge, right? So, and Anna, so the disagreement on whether people will rebel. Number one, people will rebel in the way that Bannon's talking about, because now right-wing media, if they get burned and there aren't any real cuts and all there is corporate tax cuts, which Bannon and his ilk hate for all of their other problems, they hate that stuff. And if all you get is noxious stuff, you're already in some trouble. But the real issue, Anna, is he's an out of control vehicle. He's a driverless car that's off the grid. He is going to crash, I guarantee it. All this, he's brilliant, he knows what he's doing. He's reckless, totally, utterly reckless. Here, last comment goes to our one of our members on TYT.com. By the way, annual subscription gets you 2 months off. You can join on TYT.com. Doge wrote in, Elon's management strategy is to cut everything. Then when the things break, hire fewer people to do more work, which is fine for something as inconsequential as Twitter, but it's devastating to do in the government, but devastation is the end goal. Yeah, but anarchy for its own sake is absurd, and the American people will hate it. My guess is that they're doing all of this to distract you while they actually do the robbery. Okay, I get it. You want a flashbang over here so you draw everybody's attention so they won't notice not just the normal robbery of the corporate tax cuts, but whatever else you're planning with the Social Security information, the Treasury information, the IRS information, right? They're planning something there. They're not getting that information for no reason, and it isn't for cutting. So you try that, Elon, and you're gonna reap the whirlwind. Not from me, but from the American people. But let's see, okay, you think you're so freaking smart. I don't know why he wants that information, but it is dangerous, especially with a person as ridiculously reckless as Elon Musk.
Well, it looks like the White House is uncertain of what Elon Musk's role with Doge even is, and they made that argument in court. So I've got that story and more coming up. Don't miss it.
All right, guys, if you're on YouTube, there's like a billion things you could do to help the show. One is subscribe, that's free. Another is ring the bell, that's also free. If you want to join, we'd love you. We'd love to have you. So hit the join button below or go to tyt.com. Like I said, annual membership is takes 2 months off. And then on top of that, we've got the I was gonna say Valentine's special, but it was on Valentine's Day because that's when our anniversary is. But we had the anniversary special from Friday. I think members will love that show, so make sure you're checking that out. If you're on YouTube, this is also free. This just takes about 15 seconds. Go to tyt.com/connect to connect your YouTube account and your tyt.com account. Doesn't cost you anything. It's just to make sure that you get more of the benefits. So tyt.com/connect. All right, now let's go to our members. Trump writes in, that's my French. Hey, how you feeling, Anna?
Not great.
Okay, but like an old SNL skit though, but you do look marvelous, and it's more important to look marvelous than to feel marvelous. All right.
I gotta hit up that one super wealthy billionaire guy who like injects himself with his like younger son's blood so he like stays young, but he doesn't look young. He looks a little older than his age. Anyway.
Yeah, probably not best not to hit that guy up.
I know, you're right, you're right.
Okay, Cray Souffle ads on. Geez, Anna, you look absolutely stunning today. So
that's crazy. Thank you. I'm wearing a lot of makeup. I feel like death. So I had a flu yesterday. which is why I stayed home. I feel better today, but staying home so I don't get Cenk sick.
Okay, God bless.
But I should be back in studio tomorrow.
Yeah. All right, Uriah Heap says, didn't Zelensky have dealings with Trump during his first term? Why is he shocked or surprised with this con man? Uriah, the reason is he has to not hurt Trump's feelings because you know how sensitive he is. So Zelensky's in a super hard position. I don't envy him because if he insults Trump, Trump's gonna be like, oh yeah, that's it. I'm joining Russia and we're gonna take 2/3 of Ukraine and give it to Putin's grandma, right? So Zelensky has to be like, even though Donald Trump is a brilliant, genius, wonderful man that's well endowed, could we please not give away the whole country, right? So that's the balancing act he has to do.
Okay, but don't do Zelensky dirty like that, okay? Because he is getting feisty. Or he's not totally bending the knee to Donald Trump, but you're right. He has to be somewhat diplomatic, even though Trump is saying things that I'm sure are very offensive to Zelensky and the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, I'm not blaming Zelensky 1%. I'm saying he's got a super hard needle to thread. Teddy Lucy Linda says, oh, Trump got some quality time with his BFF. Not yet. There was Rubio and his incredibly large ears and the Russians. Trump and Putin meeting next is next, okay? Anti-Descriptor says, Cenk, you said yesterday the threats to annex Canada were just a distraction, that it'll never happen because there are no donors who want that. I usually think that your analysis is spot on. Why, thank you. But do you really not think that this top donor who owns several companies that rely on types of natural resources that Canada is so rich in hasn't turned his eye to Canada in order to exploit those resources? Really interested to hear your thoughts on that. So listen, don't worry about it. The reason is, if we go to invade Canada, Trump's approval rating is going to go down to 7%. And he doesn't want that, and they'll lose all the elections. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Craig Hubbard. Craig, thanks for hitting that beautiful join button below the video. We appreciate you guys. Casper, news.
We got to talk about what Elon Musk's actual official role is with the Trump administration, because it looks like the White House doesn't even know.
I will create a government efficiency commission tasked with conducting a complete financial and performance audit of the entire federal government. And Elon, because he's not very busy, has agreed to head that task force.
You say you trust him. Trust Elon? Oh, he's not gaining anything. In fact, I wonder how he can devote the time to it. He's so into it. But I told him do that. Then I'm going to tell him very soon, like maybe in 24 hours, to go check the Department of Education. He's going to find the same thing. Then I'm going to go to the military. Let's check the military. People are calling up from all over the country wanting to do and wanting to help Elon. And also, could you mention some of the things that your team has found?
As you all just saw from that compilation video, President Donald Trump on multiple occasions has referred to Elon Musk as the leader of the Department of Government Efficiency, or at the very least, making decisions at the organization. But interestingly enough, last night, a White House official told a judge that Elon Musk is not the leader of Doge. And in fact, Musk isn't even an employee of Doge. So what's going on here? The issue of Musk's status at Doge came up during some court proceedings, thanks to a lawsuit that has been filed by 14 separate states against Musk, Trump, and Doge. These states that are involved in the suit are claiming that Musk's government role is actually unconstitutional because he has not faced any Senate confirmation hearings. He's not an elected official. They have a big problem with this, and they're taking it up with the federal courts. Now, before I give you more details on how the court proceedings are going so far and the interesting arguments being made by the executive branch, what are your thoughts, Cenk?
Yeah, if you say you're for transparency and the minute somebody asks you for transparency, you go, no way, you don't get to find out anything I'm doing. I think, oh boy, we got a problem. That's a giant red flag. So if you think, well, of course the government should have transparency. except for Elon, because Elon is so rich and he'd like to be richer than Jeff Bezos, and that's why he became the #1 donor to Donald Trump so he can control the entire government, and that's why we shouldn't find out what he's doing. You might have missed the point of transparency.
So these 14 states that are challenging Musk's role, referring to it as unconstitutional, or asking for very specific things through the federal courts. They would like to prevent Elon Musk and Doge from accessing federal databases. Obviously, these federal databases have a lot of incredibly private information, especially when we're talking about the Social Security Administration, which Doge was trying to access over the weekend. That led to a high level public servant resigning as a result. Michelle King is her name. And in that case, we're talking about medical records, okay? Because people apply for Social Security insurance as a result of disability. So that has to be some sort of violation of HIPAA rules and regulations. But nonetheless, they're also asking that, when firing federal employees or replacing them on involuntary leave, or placing them on involuntary leave, they want that all to stop, okay? That's what they're challenging. So in court, Joshua Fisher, who's the director of the White House Office of Administration, told the judge the following: Musk is an employee of the White House office and serves as senior advisor to the president. So that's the argument. This is not the leader of Doge. This isn't, almost like an official role. This is, we're talking about an employee of the White House office, and that office is allegedly separate from Doge. That's the argument that they're making. Now, Fisher continues, like other senior White House advisors, Mr. Musk has no actual or formal authority to make government decisions himself. Musk can only advise the president and communicate the president's directives. So I'm gonna pause there because I actually think that is what's happening here. I do think that Donald Trump is utilizing Elon Musk as a political human shield. I think Donald Trump wants to cut back on federal workers. Obviously, this is something that he has campaigned on. I think Donald Trump wanted to do away with entire federal government agencies. And right now, as Trump himself is enjoying relatively high approval ratings. And when I say relative, I'm talking about relative to his previous approval ratings. Right now, he's at record highs. Elon Musk is the one who's noticing a pretty massive dip in his approval rating, according to the polls. And so Musk is the one taking the hits for what Donald Trump is effectively implementing, with Musk advising him on what to do, right? So I think that's what's really going on here. I think that's how Musk is playing a role within the administration. But I also want to just note this argument is being made in the courts in order to uphold his position within the White House without having to worry about the constitutionality of it all.
Yeah, so the point about Anita Dunn's not a bad point. There have been advisors to different presidents that don't take a salary and don't have an official position. And Anita Dunn with Joe Biden is actually a very good example of that. So on the other hand, Anita Dunn didn't ask for the private information of every single American through Social Security, IRS, and Treasury, because that would have been mental. And if she had asked for that, since she's also a lobbyist and a PR specialist, I would have lost my mind and said, what the hell do you need that for? And if she came up with some BS excuse about fraud, waste, and abuse, I would have said, my ass. Absolutely not. And if you're gonna do that, then you have to be subject to conflict of interest rules. Let me see all the people that you advise for your PR agency, for your consultancy, etc. And what are they going to gain from you having that information? Aha, well, that's exactly why they don't want Musk to be considered an employee, because then he would be subject to conflict of interest rules, and he has massive, massive conflicts of interest. He could look at all of his business competitors' information through there. On that alone, it should never be allowed. And that's anti-free market, anti-capitalism. It's arguably government tyranny to have one person, just because he's the biggest donor to Trump, be able to control every American's information. If any of Biden's non-employees, like Anita Dunn, had asked for that, I'd say hell no. If any of Biden's donors, like George Soros, had asked for that, or Reid Hoffman had asked for that, I would say hell no. But now MAGA thinks, oh yeah, drain the swamp, not a big deal. And our donors are angels and they don't need conflict of interest rules and they don't need transparency. We'll blindly trust the donor class. Is that what this populism was about? You've seen me reach out and saying if you're an actual populist on the right wing and you're anti-war or anti-corruption, I'm thrilled to work with you. And I've gotten tons of blowback on that. But now comes decision time for right wingers and for MAGA. Are you guys actually populist? Did you mean the things that you said or didn't you? So when you ask for transparency, they said, absolutely, we're gonna give you transparency. Except for us, no transparency for us at all. No transparency for any of Trump's donors. By the way, whether it's Elon Musk or Miriam Adelson controlling foreign policy. No transparency at all. Conflict of interest, of course, the whole thing's a conflict of interest. Trump took hundreds of millions of dollars from them and is now giving over foreign policy and domestic policy to them. Yes, we need transparency and conflict of interest rules for them as well. I mean, at a bare minimum, tell us what your conflicts of interest are. Even if that doesn't stop you. It doesn't mean, oh, that's it, you can't do it. It just has, okay, hey, right, I do Starlink, I do SpaceX, and my competitors are Raytheon and Boeing. Oh, look at that, I just cut all their contracts and added to mine. Okay, then at least we know, and then we can make a knowledgeable decision. But if you say transparency for thee, but not for me, I think crook. So you're gonna have to prove that you're not a crook if you're saying, don't look at what I'm doing, okay? Whatever you do, I'm the top donor, don't look. That ain't populism, man, that's something else.
Yeah, I don't think the populist wing of Trump's base has realized or even accepted that they've been co-opted by corporate interests and their wing of the Republican Party is currently losing. Like they've been shut out. And unfortunately, because they love Trump so much and because Trump promotes Elon Musk so much, they're just kind of going along with it, thinking what Elon Musk is up to it must be good. But remember, we're talking about a tech CEO, again, who has his own conflicts of interest. And it is interesting what the focus has been in regard to cuts in the federal workforce or the dismantling of certain government institutions or agencies. Interesting that first you have, the dismantling of things like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau or talks of dismantling the education department. They haven't even touched the Pentagon. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, last things on that. I mean, look, that's why I said Pentagon. If you really mean it about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, and this is where the populist right does agree with me, you would go and look at the Pentagon. If you haven't looked at the Pentagon, oh, God, I haven't gotten there yet, right? And all you've done is cut people, cancer treatment and AIDS treatment, et cetera. And then you're telling me, and that combined is like a nickel and a dime compared to the giant corporate tax cuts here. Don't tell me that you really mean it when you're talking about cutting. Look, Bannon is a dangerous dude, and on social issues we could not disagree more. But on the right, it seems pretty clear that he's going to lead the rebellion against Musk. And if Bannon is driven away, and that'll have some upsides on the social issues, right? But that means the business people and the donor class, et cetera, won. And then Elon apparently is going to go and try to buy the Democratic Party too. At some point, we're going to see if right-wing populists wake up or not, okay? And I know it's super early for them to turn on Trump, but at the same time, Trump's moving, at least Elon is moving so freaking fast. And so we'll see what happens. Look, last thing, one of our members, Boomer Dragon Cat, said, Cenk, interview Bannon, let's get his insight into Musk. My God, if we interviewed Bannon, the internet's heads would explode. So maybe we should do it.
You mean, so Tuesday, basically? Anyway, we gotta go, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including what RFK Jr. is hyper-focusing on now that he has been confirmed as Health and Human Services Secretary. We'll be right back.
All right, back on TYT. Jeremy writes something that I'm really glad you wrote it in, Jeremy, because this is something that a lot of people experience that they don't often talk about, and part of the dynamic that you see online. He wrote in on TYT.com, and I made the mistake of trying to defend you on X, and I know again why I don't engage on that platform. LOL. Not that you need a defense, but I got upset at people throwing your admission of a mistake in your face. Apparently, we don't like people correcting themselves. Thanks for all you do. So the reason I read that is because, Jeremy, you're not alone. If you go to defend, this is the same playbook that has happened over and over. And so if you went to go defend us when we were having the fights with Jimmy Dore, what would have happened is a whole bunch of internet trolls would have attacked you and ripped your face off and be like, oh no, Anna's this and that. And they would have filled in the blank on sexist stuff and blah, blah, blah. And that they're all working for the CIA and Nancy Pelosi, blah, and how dare you? And then they start to attack you, right? So I don't blame any of you guys for not getting into that mess. And so I mentioned that because that's happened 18 different times and we're on number 19 here. So if you say, hey, wait, I watched the Young Turks. They do a show that's super honest and criticize Elon Musk and Donald Trump 20 times a day. How dare you, you're a Nazi, okay. Well, nobody wants to deal with that crap, right? So Jeremy goes in and says, well, she corrected herself on Project 2025. That's what an honest person does. No, Nazi, okay, all right, well, what am I gonna do, okay? And so, all right, if like the folks that are like revel in being the new crazed cult online, congratulations. Like yell at innocent people for no reason at all because everyone else is a Nazi. You sound so rational, okay? And okay, what are you gonna do, knuckleheads? Now you got Steve Bannon against Elon Musk. They're both Nazis. Okay, but yes, but which one is right about any given issue? No, Nazi. How does that help? How does that help? So when Steve Bannon, as much as we loathe him on social issues, says, hey, if you notice, they didn't cut the Pentagon and they might cut Medicaid, which would be disastrous. Does anyone else have the courage to say Steve Bannon is right about that? Oh, no, but that might hurt your brand. That might hurt your brand. But meanwhile, let him cut Medicaid, let him not touch Pentagon, don't say anything. To show, as long as everybody else is a Nazi, you're the most pure. Oh, your brand is so good. Oh, it's so pure. Okay, no. What, and guys, I mean, don't go online to talk to any of these people because they'll try to rip your head off because they're stupid and vicious, okay? But what is your plan? What is your plan? My plan is cut the goddamn Pentagon. If Elon Musk does it, great. If Bannon helps to do it, great. Do I have to agree with them on everything else? No, because I actually have a mind of my own. Not, I will do ideology 100%. But which guy do you do it with? Neither one. I will go climb in a cave and yell into the abyss Nazi. That is the dumbest plan in the world. How are you going to get the voters back on your side? If you say yell at them, you're just not that bright. All right, we'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Jen and Anna with you guys, also Vicky Cable and NoobTube, that's fun. They hit the join button below, we appreciate you guys. Johnny Diamond, I'm gonna call you Johnny every time, Chris, both gifted 5 memberships, you guys are American heroes. And Dave Goliath on join on TYT.com, where annual subscription gets you 2 months off. Okay, apparently Trump just mentioned me, but we're live on the air, I have no idea what he said. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show when we figure out what happened, all right? So God help me. All right, here we go. Anna, what's next?
All right, we got to talk about what RFK Jr. is up to now that he's been confirmed as Health and Human Services Secretary.
Listen, I know people, including members of my family, who've had a much worse time getting off of SSRIs than people have getting off of heroin. It's the withdrawal period is, I mean, and it's written on the label.
I have some experience
very
with
well
this
documented.
myself. Mr. Kennedy, this is personal for me. When I was a young woman and I was struggling with depression, thankfully, I had the resources to help me get through it. I think that everyone should have access to that care. And your job as secretary is to expand access to care, not to spread lies and misinformation.
The first order of business for RFK Jr., now that he has been confirmed as the Secretary for Health and Human Services, is to focus on a class of drugs that treat depression, anxiety, and mood disorders. His argument is that these drugs are overprescribed, that they're not as harmless as the pharmaceutical industry would have you believe. And for individuals who want to stop taking said drugs, the withdrawals are pretty terrible. So let's go over what he is planning to do, what he's not gonna do, and what the reality is when it comes to this class of drugs, also known as SSRIs. So he outlined his plans recently, saying that, he's calling for the federal government to investigate the root causes of a broad range of conditions, including autism, ADHD, asthma, obesity, multiple sclerosis, and psoriasis. So I have psoriasis. It sucks. I'm interested to see what he finds from his, inquiry or deep investigation into it. But nonetheless, while there weren't any mentions of things like childhood vaccines, which is a good thing, he did also mention these SSRIs and the multitude of mental health issues that both adults and children are struggling with. The government, he said, would assess the prevalence of and treat and threat posed by the prescription of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, antipsychotics, and mood stabilizers. Again, these are known as SSRIs. We're talking about drugs like Prozac, Zoloft, Lexapro, you get the picture. Now, Kennedy has been ringing the alarm about what he believes is the overprescription of SSRIs for a while now. He has suggested during an X Spaces that he took part in 2023 that tremendous circumstantial evidence suggested that people taking antidepressants were more likely to carry out school shootings. He did not provide any research or data to reinforce that notion. Researchers so far have not found a link between the two. And in fact, studies suggest that only a minority of school shooters were prescribed medication before they carried out, the tragic crimes that they carried out. Now, a big thing to also point out about RFK Jr.'s aversion to SSRIs is that he seems to be confusing dependency with addiction. So he's comparing people who stop taking SSRIs as individuals who stop using heroin, but we're talking about two different things here. It is true that individuals who take SSRIs for a long period of time can develop a dependence on them. And if they stop taking the drugs cold turkey, they will suffer some serious withdrawal symptoms. If they wean off the drugs too quickly, they can also suffer from similar consequences. But again, dependency and addiction are two different things. Individuals can often experience negative symptoms when they stop taking them, especially if they do so abruptly. This is similar to physical dependence, but it is different from addiction. And according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, up to 80% of people who abruptly stop taking these drugs or reduce the dosage too quickly suffer from withdrawal symptoms. Now, Professor Keith Humphreys, who's an expert in psychology and behavioral sciences at Stanford University, says that antidepressants and heroin are in different universes when it comes to addiction risk. In my 35 years in the addiction field, I've met only 2 or 3 people who thought they were addicted to antidepressants versus thousands who were addicted to heroin and other opioids. Now, the other thing that I'll just say is I am open to inquiry into an investigation to see whether there is evidence of overprescription of these types of drugs as it pertains to minors. Look, the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, and we've done so many stories about this, takes doctors on vacations and gifts them. And that's how the opioid crisis became such a monster. It's because of the corrupting influence of pharmaceutical lobbyists and how they try to encourage doctors to prescribe drugs, in some cases overprescribe drugs. So I think that it is maybe possible that there's overprescription. However, I get a little uncomfortable with RFK Jr. kind of minimizing the importance of these drugs for people who genuinely do need them, because it has improved the quality of life for a lot of Americans. And so we have to be careful. I mean, when it came to the opioid crisis, when the federal government came in and they started implementing pretty harsh restrictions, that ended up, turning into a heroin crisis and then a fentanyl crisis. And then people who genuinely did need those pain medications were unable to access them, even though they were struggling with chronic pain. So this is a delicate matter. And so I want him to proceed with caution. Those are my thoughts. What do you think, Jake?
So first, I'm going to go to our members. They're split on this. So go to tyt.com/join and become a member and be part of the show, get all of our content. Jesus Take the Wheel says, as someone who's been on SSRIs for most of my life due to a very abusive childhood, I can say that these drugs are life-saving for people dealing with depression, myself included. On the other hand, worst case scenario, Dragon says, I agree, SSRIs are being overprescribed. We need to pay for therapists and fix our effed up culture. You're not crazy, the culture is. So I agree with both.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. Yeah, so what do I think of RFK Jr.'s plans? Well, that's a giant, it depends. So what does it depend on? Well, what is his plan? We don't know it yet. So if right now he's saying, let's study them. Great, I got no problem studying them. Study away, I love science, okay? And if you make up junk science, then I'm not gonna love it. But if you're doing real meta studies, that would be terrific. If you wanna do a whole new study, you wanna do a whole new 10 studies, it's not gonna make any difference in the budget at all. It's a drop in the bucket. It's not even a drop. So have at it, Hoss. Give us more science. And so am I foreclosing the possibility that these drugs, might be dangerous in ways that we don't necessarily expect? No, I'm not foreclosing that possibility. Look, there's been a lot of studies on it already, so I'm more likely to believe that. On the other hand, it's not like the pharmaceutical companies don't try to affect studies. So we have to be careful about that as well. And I would like that to be as neutral a process as possible. So on the other hand, if Kennedy says, so I'm a little concerned about this, so that's why we're banning all that medication now. I'd be like, whoa, no. Like there's a lot of people that it helps. And so far the studies say that it is relatively safe. So, but he hasn't said that, okay? So if he switches over to that side, then I'm gonna have huge problems with it. But in terms of finding out more, I don't see any harm in it.
And by the way, concerns regarding the overprescription of these specific of this specific class of drugs those concerns have existed for a long time, and not just in the United States. There have been researchers in the UK who have been concerned about this as well. I want to just quickly go to graphic 7 here, where it was reported that in the US, antidepressants are among the most prescribed medicines. The majority prescribed by primary care doctors, not mental health experts, according to the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine. And to our viewers' point about how people need access to therapy, I totally agree with you on that, because a lot of insurance companies, they don't cover talk therapy. Insurance companies make it difficult, and talk therapy is expensive. It really is. If you're paying for that out of pocket, it might end up that it's cheaper to just take a prescription drug, but that might not be the best answer for you. So that is a legitimate concern. Around 13.2% of US adults were using antidepressants between 2017 and 2018, and that's according to the CDC. And the most recent National Health and Nutrition Examination survey. This number is believed to have increased since, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in 2023, the UK, which actually ranks one place below the United States in regard to the number of people taking antidepressants, a group of medical professionals looked into this. And so over the past decade, the group explains in an open letter in the British Medical Journal, antidepressant prescriptions have almost doubled in England, rising from 47.3 million in 2011 to 85.6 million in 2022 to 2023. Over 8.6 million adults in England are now prescribed SSRIs annually, and that's nearly 20% of adults, with prescriptions set to rise over the next decade. And look, these drugs, obviously, like all prescription drugs, have side effects, including weight gain, sexual dysfunction, bleeding, dizziness that can lead to falls. And so there are side effects. There is concern that the corrupting influence of pharmaceutical companies is leading to the overprescription of these drugs. I have no problem with anyone looking more deeply into this issue. But yeah, I mean, I would be 100% against banning these drugs because, again, they have improved the lives of countless people, not just in America, but obviously across the world as well. We just want to be more careful and ensure they're not being overprescribed.
Yeah, so our members are super split on this. We got a poll on it too. Are you worried about RFK Jr. looking into this? The polls are always in the live chat. 67% saying they're worried. So watch the show Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock Eastern. You'll get to participate that way as well. So Jackal Dragon 1991 says, on Twitch, does RFK want to know what happens when I don't take my antidepressants? Right. On the other hand, Big B 510 says antidepressants suck and absolutely give horrible side effects. F anyone that disagrees with this. First of all, don't, because a lot of people disagree, and you might have had a different experience than other people. But there are many experiences like yours, so that's why I think if it starts with a conversation. And we look into whether things are being overprescribed, I would view that as a good thing. And remember, guys, if we had had this conversation about Oxy, 10, 15 years ago, a lot of the doctors would have said, no, it's totally fine. We're not overprescribing. Everything is fine, just trust us. And it turns out in that case, everything wasn't fine, and they were overprescribing, and Oxy was not doing what it said it was doing. So let's look into it more without taking any rash actions and taking anything off the market.
When we come back from the break, let's talk a little bit about what one Democrat is arguing is the main problem with the party, why they're failing, and what they need to change. We'll be right back.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover, so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories.
We play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
Any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcasting cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma, and we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
Indisputable exclusive. Exclusive, disputable, exclusive. We brought you this first. No other news agency has this video. No other news agency has this story.
Every week on Indisputable, we do original, exclusive, investigative reporting you'll find nowhere else.
Our reports have been viewed by millions. Hosted by Sean King, Ben Crump, Senator John Ossoff.
You, through your investigative reporting, unearthed very troubling allegations about specific forms of abuse and discrimination in the federal prison system.
We catching these cases on camera. Just imagine the things that we don't see.
Our groundbreaking investigations and exclusive interviews bring you the real voices no one else wants you to hear. We tell the stories.
Imagine a prison that is so racist, the corrections officers contact me. That is a life or death situation being created. A black woman who was driving for Uber was allegedly assaulted by a white male passenger. After we got involved, roughly 24 hours later, the police all of a sudden opened up an investigation. What was going through your mind when bullets were simply flying inside of your vehicle?
Honestly, I thought I was going to die.
Did these officers ever say that you fit the description of somebody they were looking for? Did they say that?
Never.
Okay, that means they lied.
And we want you to be part of our truth-telling movement. Send pictures and video of stories no one else is telling and a 1 or 2 paragraph summary of the story to Indisputable's exclusive tip line at indvideos@tyt.com.
If you have more information about what's happening at this particular facility, please let me know.
Together, we're challenging the system, and together, we're making a difference.
I have the entire background to this story, and it is going to make your blood boil.
Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Ritchie, unveiling the truth, empowering the people. Weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific.
Have common sense.
I'm a very stable genius.
Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, Science Not Negotiable, who just joined at tyt.com. I love that handle. I agree with you. Not negotiable. And then on YouTube, we got Stephanie Dalidenas, who also joined. Stephanie, you're awesome and welcome to TYT community. All right, by the way, the chat was a little bit off. Trump talked, I think, about cutting defense, but not me specifically. Okay, Casper, what's next?
Well, we got to talk a little bit about a Democratic senator who is calling out members of his own party, something that's a bit unheard of when it comes to Democrats, but he has some advice on how to win. Let's see if we're buying it.
The big question for Democrats is what it means to be an effective opposition party. And I think there are 2 issues here, right? One is what Democrats should actually do to counter Trump's actions. And the other is how you should communicate what you're doing.
We can't be afraid of failing. That's number one. I think that's the biggest mistake I've seen Democrats do is that we're always afraid. We're always afraid of failing, so we don't take risks.
That was Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego speaking to the New York Times and sharing some pretty harsh criticisms about his Democratic colleagues and why it is that they're having so much difficulty serving as an opposition party or honestly these days, winning elections. And there's one particularly embarrassing insider detail about the Democrats that Gallego reveals that you do not want to miss. So stick around for that. But first, being too timid was far from the only gripe with his party. So during this conversation on the New York Times podcast, Gallego also spent a long time sharing his views on why the Democrats lost touch with everyday Americans and ended up losing so poorly in the 2024 presidential election. Let's take a look.
The problem is, I think, we have to separate what we're hearing from kind of the DC crowd from what we're hearing kind of in the streets, from what we're hearing about everyday common Americans. Because, I go back to Arizona, they're actually not talking about USAID. And they're not talking about the courts. They're still talking about egg prices. They're still talking about the cost of everything. So one of the things we have to be very mindful of is that we may engage in a fight, but the rest of the American public may not be with us because they don't understand this fight. And we need to make sure that we're matching our politics to what actually is happening in the world, because sometimes when we have that disconnect, we miss, and then we miss really, really badly. And unfortunately, now we know we can't miss, because when we do, it has political fallout. Like the stuff that's happening right now is because we entirely missed where the American public was during the 2024 election.
Well, look, much like the Republicans in Congress, who, by the way, also have super low approval ratings, Democrats just don't talk to normal people. He's right about that. But at this point, Cenk, I don't even think Democrats are even capable of connecting with normal people. We're talking about multimillionaires. Okay, we're talking about people who live a completely different lifestyle from the vast majority of Americans, including their constituents. And look, you're an incumbent. More often than not, you're able to just ride, you're able to coast. You're the incumbent. And people just vote based on party lines. So if you're living in a blue state or a blue district, you're gonna get reelected as the incumbent. You don't really have to go out of your way, to connect to ordinary everyday Americans. But that has this deteriorating effect on the party as a whole throughout the decades. And I think that's part of the reason why the Democrats find themselves in the position they're in right now. They don't understand ordinary Americans. They don't seem to care about workers. I've said this before, I'll say it again. They seem to almost loathe the Democratic base, meaning the voters, and they feel entitled to getting reelected. They feel entitled to Democratic voters literally doing the work for them to help them get elected and reelected. It's pathetic. So I largely agree with what Gallego is saying here. And look, a lot of them are too old. They need to retire. They need to make way for young, fresh, Democratic leadership, but they're unwilling to do that, and it makes me sick. So that's why the Democrats are losing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Gallego is an interesting cat. He just became a senator, historically a little bit more progressive, a little bit of populist, etc. Had an interesting vote recently. Maybe we'll get to that on immigration. So his first thought on don't be afraid. That's what the problem with the Democrats is. I totally agree. And I'm going to explain why the Democrats are so rudderless in a second. But it's absolutely true. They're like, okay, wait, is it poll tested? Did the consultants say it's okay? Did the donors say it's okay? I don't know what to. Do you have any opinions? Like, forget the polls and the consultants and stuff. Just like you, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, whoever. Do you actually hold any principles? Are you passionate about anything? So when Trump does something wrong, or the American people are not getting something, higher wages, healthcare, etc., does that bother you? Does that, make you angry? And we know the answer. No, they're all insipid, vanilla, cutout, cardboard cutouts sent in by an assembly line of corporate donors. So they're not animated to begin with, let alone making mistakes. I make 100 mistakes. Why? Because I give a damn about things. So I just charge into fight, and when you charge into a fight, I mean, hopefully I've thought it through, and I'd like to think that most of the time that I have. But even so, you're gonna make mistakes because you're taking action. But if you don't take any action, you won't make any mistakes, and that's why they're frozen. They're like deer in the headlights. So I disagree with him on one thing, Anna, which is, he says, okay, save your powder for just economic issues. Now that sounds like something that I would love, right? I'm a huge believer in economic populism overall. I agree with that as your focus. But I think you could at the same time say cutting cancer research was a bad idea. Cutting treatment for AIDS in Africa was a terrible idea. Cutting the water to get lead poisoning, the resources to get lead poisoning out of the water, terrible idea. And we could highlight those, we could talk about those while not being hysterical and not yelling Nazi at everything, right? And by the way, guys, there's a giant constitutional crisis coming if he doesn't listen to the courts. Do not cry wolf until there is an actual constitutional crisis, which by the way might be days away. So if you cry, like you can talk about, hey, why are we letting the lead back in the water without calling it a constitutional crisis or without calling them Nazis or racists, right? But still be super adamant and passionate about that topic. So, but the reason why-
Center the people, center people.
Yes.
Rather than centering your hatred for the right wing as your argument. That's all they do. That's literally all the Democrats do. All they do is talk about how dangerous Trump is, how bad Elon Musk is. I get it, okay. But when they make those arguments, the way they come across is a bunch of elitist pricks who only care about their own power, only care about getting reelected, and they never center the best interests of the American people in any of the arguments they make. And that has been the case since at least 2016, right? Like Trump bad is not only something that most Americans at this point are fatigued from hearing from Democrats. That argument has made them so rusty in being able to make compelling, persuasive arguments in regard to how they're going to serve the people. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, so why do they do Trump bad, Elon bad, like in place of things that would actually help the American people? Because they think, exactly to your point, Anna, they think it's me versus them. No, brother, it's who's going to serve the voters better? I know a Democrat hasn't thought that, other than Bernie Sanders, a couple other guys. They haven't thought that in decades. I mean, I wrote about this in my book, Justice is Coming. We lost these guys. They're a bunch of corporate goons now. So the idea of like, oh, well, I was attacking that guy because it was between me and him, and me. Oh, there's voters involved? Oh, where are they? Or are they below us? Where are they? But Anna, you center the voters 100% right. Instead, they're centering Trump or Musk because they view them as their opponents, or they're centering the donors, which gets to my major point here, which is the reason the Democrats don't know what to do is because of the story I did for you guys yesterday, where the donors have gone home. They're now saying we don't want retaliation from Trump, and we might work with Trump if he's giving away goodies. I'm jealous of my Silicon Valley CEO buddies that are getting all those goodies. I might just flip over to the Republican side. Now, without the donors, which is what they base their entire existence around, they're just a bunch of lemmings going around, what do we do? There's no donors to give us orders. Where's our orders? That's part of why they're frozen.
So we've got two more videos. I actually want to go to the next clip where Gallego was asked why Donald Trump was able to connect with Latino voters, especially Latino men, a lot more this time around. Gallego argues it was because Trump was willing to meet them where they're at. Let's take a look.
The way that Trump communicates is actually more apt to get younger Latino men voters, because where they gather their information, where they listen to politics, is where Trump is more often, versus where we are. He's on podcasts all the time. He's at UFC fights, right? He's at all these things where they actually see that, see him being a real quote unquote man. And going into the election 2023, I also warned Democrats about that we needed to get out there. I had a lot of recommendations that weren't listened to. I wanted President Biden to go to the Copa America game and sit next to some Latino celebrity. I love boxing. I'm like, let's go to some boxing matches, right? Let's take some Democrats to boxing matches and meet where a lot of Latinos are. And the fact is, when you go into a big election in 2024, and you're gonna have a lot of young men coming to vote for the first time that didn't vote in 2022. And all they're learning about politics is through podcasts, through UFC fights. We're gonna start losing that vote if we don't. And we did, and we need to figure out how to get into that world.
Well, yeah, like the idea that Biden was gonna go to like a UFC fight or go to a soccer game is laughable, right? I mean, the way Biden was sold to Democratic voters and some independents in 2020 was things are really chaotic right now and we just want to go back to normalcy. And so we long for the days of the Obama administration. Biden was in the Obama administration as VP. Let's just vote him into office. And he promises he's only going to run for one term. Well, obviously that was a lie. Look, The biggest issue, Cenk, is yes, the donors, which you love to harp on because of good reason. Like the donors have totally corrupted the Democratic Party where they are now literally paid to forget what's in the best interest of ordinary working class Americans. But on top of that, they lack energy, they lack charisma. Watch any Senate hearing, any House hearing involving Democratic leadership, and they'll put you to sleep. Super uninspiring. What do they even stand for? What do they represent? I don't even know. At this point, I don't know what the Democratic Party stands for. I don't know what their identity is.
Yeah, well, 95% of the time, the person with more money wins. So these guys were not picked based on being charismatic and being able to appeal to the voters. They were picked based on their ability to fillet donors. So, and that's true of the Uniparty, both establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans. That's why Trump won so easily, because he went into debates with a bunch of people who are all robots, and they're like, we have been told that this is great and that is great, and tax cuts are great for the American people, give everything to the rich. And Trump was like, yeah, whatever, I'm gonna speak like a normal person, and I'm gonna make 1,000 mistakes, but at least I look human, as opposed to these guys who just came off the assembly line. And on our side, we had Bernie, and same thing, but our assembly line beat Bernie. Their assembly line lost to Donald Trump. So that's the difference between the two parties. And Gallego is totally right about, hey, go out there and find where the people actually are. There's a reason why they don't do it, which is that they can't talk to normal people. I'm being dead serious. Corporate Democrats cannot talk to a normal human being. You'll ask like Hakeem Jeffries or any of them, really fill in the blank, like 90% of the Democratic Party. You'll ask them a normal question, they're like, is this a lie? This is not, where's my propaganda? This is not allowed. That's why they never come on this show. By the way, let's note for the fact that Gallego is saying how they have to go to these online podcasts, et cetera, as he's talking to the New York Times. So I've seen this happen now. I'm not blaming Gallego, he's saying largely right things. But like I've now seen this 1,000 times. Well, they get a bunch of establishment guys on CNN, New York Times, et cetera, and they're like, okay, what do you think populists think? What do you think populists think? Well, what do you guys think about real people? But none of them are real people. So they never once talked to a real person. So I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, so are the Democrats flooding the online airwaves and going on left-wing shows, centrist shows, right-wing shows, bro shows? No, none of them are doing that, because they're scared to death to talk to an actual human being.
Well, they are scared to death to talk to actual human beings. And in fact, Gallego himself called them out on that. Let's take a look.
I was actually shocked to learn that President Trump was the first sitting president to go to a Super Bowl game.
Yeah, and he'll go to UFC fights. He's gonna go to soccer games. He's gonna do everything, right? And like, why are we not doing it? I'll tell you why, because I have heard this before. I'm not gonna tell you which politician was worried about this, but their staff told me, like, I don't want my guy getting booed. It's like, well, so you don't expose yourself to anybody, but then you also don't expose yourself to anybody. And again, this is just the president. This is everybody really running last year.
Yeah, look, these people are pathetic. What else can you say about it, Cenk?
Yeah, last thing is, that's when Biden refused to go to the last Super Bowl interview. That's when alarm bells started ringing, even in DC. And that's when he lost smart people like Ezra Klein and Nate Silver and others, when they were like, and even David Axelrod, they're like, you're not doing the Super Bowl interview, the softest interview of all interviews, and the one that goes to the most amount of people. If you don't do the Super Bowl interview, then you're not gonna do any interviews. You're not gonna even participate in this race. What are you doing? And that's when they began to realize that his brain had melted, something we realized a year before then, right? And so now, though, look at what Gallego is saying. It's not just Biden. Biden had dementia, couldn't answer questions. But Kamala Harris didn't have dementia. 99% of the Democratic Party right now presumably doesn't have dementia. Where are you guys? Waiting orders from donors, uploading, don't have orders yet, don't know what to do. How do I oppose Trump? Okay, well, that party's not gonna win. Good news though, we don't need them. Let's go win the Democratic primary in 2028. These guys they're ghosts, they're nothing. You see how paper tigers, I told you the whole time, their only reason they won outside of the money was mainstream media. Okay, now mainstream media is defeated. They're in shambles. So now we go and we do a real populist challenge to the Democratic Party, and this time we win. Look, we're not even gonna have any opposition. They're gonna be like, loading. I don't know what the donors want me to see. And then we're gonna go and kick their goddamn asses. These Democrats that are currently the establishment Democrats, they're never going to learn. They're not capable of learning. They're not even human, they're robots. And the donors program them. We don't program them. So you're never, ever going to get them to turn around. Instead, you do the logical thing. You defeat them in primaries, then you take the party. Just like Trump did with the Republicans. Oh, it's impossible. What do you mean it's impossible? An idiot did it on the other side. So now without Joe Scarborough and Whoopi Goldberg, beating everyone that like with paddles that dares to oppose corporate Democrats, they got no defenses left. Let's go kick their ass and take the party back.
Bari Weiss versus Tucker Carlson when we come back.
All right, back on TYT. All right, so let's go, guys, so many comments here. Let's start with Super Chat. A dude with no name, I said, hi, Cenk and Anna. Thanks for providing a channel of truth, whether good or bad. Anna's beautiful as always. Cenk, you look like my late brother, Ur. I live for hearing the baga. I couldn't do the noise, sorry. But thank you, we appreciate you. Gina Dam said, that's it. Gina Dam said, love you two, keep it up, thank you. Rage Rock for now said, the reasons Trump approval rating is so high is surely because people are desperately trying to remain optimistic, and it's so early in his term. I think that's totally right. In the beginning of a term, the president's approval numbers are always higher. Barack Obama had that legendary 83% approval rating in the beginning of his term. I think a lot, and the American people are, to their credit, are being fair. They're waiting to see what he does. And then do we like it or do we not like it? And remember, they gave up on the Democratic Party. It doesn't mean they're necessarily sold on Trump. Obviously the core MAGA base is, but tons of that 77 million that voted for him are not at all sold yet. They were mainly voting against Democrats. So
for now, they're not, the actions of Elon Musk for the moment being are not hurting Donald Trump in his polls, right? In the polls, he's still doing okay. But in regard to the specific areas in which the electorate really approves of the job that Trump is doing, poll after poll indicates it's immigration. So look, guys, this is the reason why when it comes to issues pertaining to immigration and how it's negatively impacting certain communities across the country, you have to take that seriously and not automatically take the opposite position because Republicans have decided to, plant their flag in the we need to, deport position. Like, there were people who were causing problems in various communities. I tried to draw attention to it, and the reason why is if you don't deal with that as the party in charge, the Democratic Party at the time, that is going to drum up and bolster more and more support for things like mass deportation. Where the American public is today versus where they were in 2016 on the issue of mass deportation is night and day. Yeah. And there's a reason for that.
And the more that people on the left said there is no crime and there is no immigration problem and there are no criminal immigrant gangs, the angrier and angrier people got, including
100%,
including the core Democratic voters in Chicago, New York, LA, and everywhere. Chris wrote in, hope you feel better soon, Anna. Can't salsa with the flu, we need you. Although I think we're on to the hustle, right, Anna? And then
Cha-cha, you got to get it right, Jim.
Cha-cha.
Cha-cha.
I hustled right past the cha-cha. Okay, R. Stone wrote in, I think those who voted for Trump have forgotten how lazy he is. Remember, he said he has concepts of a plan that was Project 2025. I'm just waiting for the heel turn where Elon ends up screwing over Trump. Oh man, that Elon versus Trump thing is going to be gorgeous. I think that Elon's going to crash. He's going to be in the low teens. They're going to have to dump him. It's going to drive Trump all the way into the 30s in approval rating. But maybe I'm wrong. Let's see what happens. Thomas Daniel wrote in, somebody please keep the Doge bags away from my personal data. Clever. I like it. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Chang and Anna with you guys. More news.
We got to talk about this speech by Bari Weiss, of course, the founder of Free Press, who is not very happy with some of the statements regarding foreign policy coming from Tucker Carlson. Let's get into it.
If a political movement does not police its ranks, does not draw lines, if a political movement neglects to protect its borders, if it does not defend its sacred values, it cannot long endure. We may wind up spending the next few years watching the same story we just lived through on the other side, as the far right, and not the way cable defines it, which includes almost everyone in this room today, but as the real far right devours what remains of the center right.
That was the founder of the Free Press, Bari Weiss, who decided to go after what she dubbed the far right. And she also stated that it could corrupt the entirety of the conservative movement if left unchecked. So Weiss did take some not so subtle shots at specific individuals, namely Tucker Carlson in particular. So we'll get to him in just a minute. But first, let's hear a little more of Weiss's thoughts on the far right overall.
This group says that we're in a war here at home, and that because we're at war, because the stakes are life and death, the normal rules of the game need to be suspended. They say that those who don't go along with that are squishes or traitors, or they were secret leftists all along. Or they accuse them of being conservative or Republican in name only, which is a version of the false consciousness that Marxists are so fond of telling people that they suffer from. They say it's not enough to return to normal or renew our old values, because that's not an option. Instead, what they say is that it's time to give the other side a taste of their own medicine. They say, we were treated cruelly, and so cruelty is the only response.
I have to correct one small thing. And look, a lot of people make this argument. It's not founded in reality. There's a lot of people running around online who like to call themselves Marxists, and they're not Marxists, they're radical liberals. There are like 5, like I could count them on my hand, Marxists in the country. I know them personally. None of them subscribe to the rad lib, doctrine of hall monitoring and speech policing or any of that stuff. So I just want to make that quick correction. But she's making this argument, Cenk, about how the Democratic Party has really suffered as a result of their failure in getting control of some of the more excessive, I guess the excesses of the radical liberals. But can you make that same parallel with the conservatives?
Yeah, so look, I think that this is complicated. And she's about to take on Tucker Carlson, and I'll probably agree with Tucker on some of it. And there's a code word that she used there. It seems benign, American values, and she'll talk about Western values. It's not benign. If she really meant it, then it would be perfectly great. But I'll tell you what it actually means in a minute. But when she distinguishes between the far right and the center right, I appreciate that. I think that makes sense. because not everyone on the right is the same. And in fact, I draw another distinction. Then there's the moderates and the independents that voted for Donald Trump who just hate the establishment, and he seemed less establishment. I don't even think they're right wing at all. So that portion, right? So it's a big spectrum, and there are different parts of the spectrum. And so, and of course, I've talked about the far left versus the center left or populist left, and everybody catches feelings over it. And why? Because both the far right and the far left are incentivized to pretend that all of the voters on their side agree with them. No one actually elected them to those positions. No one actually voted that way. In fact, when we do vote, they almost always get annihilated, both the far right and the far left. But they say, no, we are the kings and queens of what is left and what is right. So the fact that she's pushing back against that on the right, I think is terrific. I think the other thing that she's pushing back against that's terrific is this idea of violating the normal rules and laws of America. No, we should follow the laws of America. And that is, shouldn't be a right wing or left wing position, but certainly that used to be a right wing position, rule of law, right? At least a talking point. So, and she's right when she points out that the far right makes excuses for Donald Trump saying, potentially ignore the courts and then that he's above the law. Oh, well, they did it. That's the most common excuse I hear. Well, if they did it and they're so evil, what does that make you when you do it? So that is not a principled way to act, and I appreciate that. Yes, later I'm going to disagree with her.
So look, Weiss is covering a lot of ground there, but she could at least in part be alluding to this post by President Donald Trump, which she quoted. So he had said, "He who serves his country does not violate any law." Bari Weiss disagrees. I disagree with that as well. I mean, it depends on what the dear leader is up to, and if he is violating things like constitutional rights and the rule of law, then yeah, that's a problem. And look, the argument that he's making there is this ridiculous argument of how the means don't have to justify the ends, but I disagree with that entirely. I think the means do have to justify the ends, and the idea of by any act necessary to get what you want, that's unacceptable. You have to follow the law and you have to keep constitutional rights in mind. And so I agree with Bari Weiss on this. Now, she went on to criticize Tucker Carlson in her speech. Let's give that a watch.
Just as the left defaced and desecrated statues of Churchill, the vandals on the right desecrate his name and his memory. While the left, long sympathetic with Stalin, today sympathizes with modern day Nazis in the form of Hamas, the new right eulogizes the original ones. And in rehabilitating Hitler, and I'm not exaggerating, they don't just demonize Jews, but they demonize the West itself.
I'm gonna let you take this one, Cenk.
Yeah, there we go. When they demonize it, poor victim Israel, they demonize all of the West. So you in Kansas, even though it looks like you giving $300 billion to Israel is a giant waste of your money, no, Israel is the bulk of Western values. The West loves to commit genocide and ethnic cleansing. And if anyone doesn't voluntarily give up their land to Israel, the West values is to slaughter them endlessly. Wait, you got a little derailed there, Barry. That doesn't have anything to do with what you were talking about before, which I liked. So I knew she was going to go there when she started using the word values, because American values then morphs into Western values. And the trick of the Israeli supporters is the West is comprised of America and Israel. That's it. Maybe a little bit of Europe, but I don't like their socialist policies. I like their, how they look. Their socialist policies, no, so just Israel and America, and not really America, just give everything to Israel, okay? So now we've got a conflict because Tucker Carlson is not interested in giving everything to Israel, and so are many other folks. And then there was a recent fight we covered on the show where Mark Levin was upset that there was somebody going to go into the Defense Department that whose sole job wasn't kissing Israel's ass. And then Charlie Kirk stood up for that guy, and so did JD Vance, and so did Elon Musk. So now we've got a rift. We've got a significant difference in foreign policy here. And so on this one, I'm totally against Bari Weiss. And in the other camp, Israel shouldn't be first. I don't even think it should be second. I don't know why we even care about Israel, let alone gave them $300 billion. I could understand why we cared about it maybe in 1948, and that was an interesting and debatable point. But at this point, they're one of the strongest nations on earth, both militarily and economically. And and people here saying, no, we demand all of your money anyway. Well, the left wing hates it, and that's why she said the left likes Hamas, which is Nazis. The left likes Nazis. Before they used to like Stalin, and now they love Hitler. Shut up. That is so hyperbolic and ridiculous. And Barry, do you really believe that all of the left likes Stalin? Because you're making yourself look ridiculous and totally uneducated when you say that. And then now you turn around to, if you don't support giving endless billions of dollars to Israel to slaughter more Palestinians and take Gaza, take the West Bank, take everything, and we have all the land. If you don't support that, you're now a Nazi. No, not interested, not at all interested. And you ruined the first half of your speech, which was actually a good speech until you got to. Now remember, everybody, the whole point of me telling you all of this is so you give all of your money to Israel. Not at all interested. Thank you.
So we do have a poll on this, Bari Weiss versus Tucker Carlson. Jake, do you want to present it?
Yeah, who's gonna win on foreign policy? So I'm not talking about the rule of law. I agree with Bari Weiss on that. And yes, by the way, it turns out you could agree and disagree in parts with a human being, whether they're on the right or the left. If you use this crazy thing we have in our body called your mind, okay, instead of me hate all of them, but they disagree. So which one do you hate on this disagreement? When it comes to foreign policy, on the issue of Israel, I hate it, but yeah, Tucker's right and Bari Weiss is wrong. So sad day for anyone who doesn't want to use their mind. And now, by the way, the reason why Bari Weiss and Mark Levin and other supporters of Israel in America are starting to give these speeches and even lash out at Trump for his appointments is because they're beginning to panic, because Israel is in the middle of losing the right wing. And once they lose the right wing, they ain't got no wing left. So because then at that point, it becomes super obvious that it's the American people versus AIPAC. And they don't want that to be obvious, even though it's really been that way for decades.
Some interesting revelations from comedian Dave Chappelle when we come back from the break.
All right, guys, you got so many comments here. I'm never gonna be able to get to all of them, especially if I screw up the iPad right before the break. All right, here we go. Let's go to TYT.com. I bathe in a billionaire banker's tears says, wow, Anna nailing it on 1 day out from the flu. I need a week before my brain works again. So it's nice of you to say. And she's a credible trooper for showing up and doing the show. America Needs a Reboot says, I recently stopped taking SSRIs about a month and a half ago, and I am struggling, but I'm fighting through it. So good on you for fighting through it. We're gonna do Operation Joy tonight. Let's talk about all of those issues, but I know it's hard. I know people who've benefited a lot from those drugs, and I know people who've had trouble with them. So I'm open to all of your experiences. Repcat, the political catboy, says, maybe we all wouldn't be so damn depressed if we didn't have a gun to our head saying, work or you starve and die, or could actually pursue our interests and furthering our communities without that threat of poverty hanging over our heads. Repcat, you're not the only one. Several other members wrote in saying the same thing. Yeah, we might need those SSRIs because of how awful our government is and how it puts so much stress on the American people, and that is part of the issue. Worst case scenario, Dragon says, I agree SSRIs are being overprescribed. We need to pay for therapists and fix our effed up culture. You're not crazy, the culture is, did I read that one already? Anyways, thank you for writing in. Nasty Dragon says, yep, calling everyone a Nazi and racist has been working great. That's the laziest way to be a politician. It may have worked in 2020, but that stuff is over with. It's time for our politicians to actually do some work. Here. I mean, boy, 100 out of 100 on that. Belica Denmark wrote in, quoting from some BBC adventure drama, and therein lies the problem with the 21st century, the rampant inability to hold two conflicting ideas in your brain simultaneously. Yes, interview Bannon, it's possible to be right about something and evil about others. And I love our audience, I love our members, that's exactly right. I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. I've been telling everybody, not related to even politics, in our personal lives. Two things can be true at the same time. Oh, but if something's really bad, it's true, you're right. And we'll talk about it again in Operation Joy for the members tonight. But something's also going right in your life. So which one should we focus on? So more of that conversation coming up. CSaversa89 said, Jing and Anna, a few times ago, I've gone down the rabbit hole looking at anti-TYT videos on YouTube, and I just don't get it. Thank you to both of you for being willing to report inconvenient truths, even knowing that it will result in blowback. America and the world needs that. On behalf of truth, thank you. Thank you to all of our members. You guys are amazing, open-minded, open-hearted. That's exactly what we love and want. And this community's terrific. It's everything we could possibly ask for. Book said, Elon Musk buying corporate Democrats would be the best thing to ever happen for progressives because the Democratic base would completely desert the corporate Democrats. I think that actually might play out that way. So that'll be super interesting to see. Bloated Ego said there's been a number of presidents that have hurt the goal of peace around the world, but I don't think anyone has hurt that goal more than Biden. Ouch. And there is a lot of truth that he didn't try for peace at all, and arguably made the Russia-Ukraine war worse, certainly arguably made the Israel situation worse. I am out of time. We'll be right back, guys. All right, back on TYT, Jing and Anna with you guys. More news.
Let's talk a little bit about censorship, comedian Dave Chappelle, and how to approach jokes that the left doesn't like moving forward. So, comedian Dave Chappelle is alleging that the producers over at Saturday Night Live attempted to censor his monologue when he appeared on the show last month. Now, per SF Gates senior culture editor, Dan Gentile, who saw the comedian at the first of his 3 San Francisco stand-up appearances at the Masonic, Chappelle alleged that he was not allowed to speak about Gaza and transgender people. So those were the 2 issues that the producers at SNL told Chappelle, do not even weigh in on that. Please leave that out of your monologue entirely. Now, he didn't listen entirely, which is honestly not that surprising. Remember, he got a lot of backlash from transgender activists, the transgender community in regard to some of his jokes about the community. He doubled down. It almost became kind of obsessive when it came to his specials. And to be honest with you, I think it kind of hijacked his specials and kind of ruined some of the last few ones that he did. However, it is interesting that they didn't want him to weigh in on Gaza or the Palestinians. Turns out that was something he was unwilling to listen to. Now, before we get to what he said during his monologue, I just want to remind you all that he's actually been, a fierce advocate of the Palestinians. So during a performance at the UAE back in May of last year in 2024, here's what he said. So about halfway through in a wide-ranging comedy set in Abu Dhabi, Chappelle, a Muslim, initially said he had been told by his friends either to discuss the war or not. From the audience, a woman screamed, "Free Palestine." The crowd cheered. Chappelle then said the Gaza Strip faces a genocide. He also said that making Jews safer in America amid rising cases of anti-Semitism would make them realize they don't need Israel as an ultimate protector. I doubt that would happen, but nonetheless, that's the argument he made. Now, according to the AP, even before coming on stage, the crowd at Abu Dhabi's arena basically cheered as Chappelle's DJ Trauma, played a song, My Blood is Palestinian, by the Palestinian singer Mohammed Asaf. So his views on the Palestinian people is pretty clear. Now, fast forward to his monologue for SNL last month. He did not heed their warnings about avoiding any discussion or any mention of the Palestinians. Here's what he said in the closing moments of his monologue, quote, "The presidency is no place for petty people. So Donald Trump, I know you watched the show, man. Remember, whether people voted for you or not, they're all counting on you. Whether they like you or not, they're all counting on you. The whole world is counting on you." And then he says, "I mean this when I say good luck. Please do better next time. Please, all of us, do better next time. Do not forget your humanity and please have empathy for displaced people, whether they're in the Palisades or Palestine." So he's referring to the fire-ravaged Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles, which, by the way, the recovery effort in regard to, Altadena, Pacific Palisades, it's been a disaster, but that's a different story. But Cenk, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because when you're in favor of censoring speech, when you're engaging in joke policing, you have to keep in mind that that will impact speech that you yourself like. You don't get to pick winners and choosers. In a society that is, favorable toward a culture of censorship, certain speech that you like, certain speech that you want out there is going to be censored. And so you might disagree with his jokes and what he had to say previously about the transgender community, but opening up, an avenue for censorship in that regard, that'll translate into other issues. And in this case, we're talking about the Palestinian issue that he was, almost censored against speaking about.
Yeah, well, Brett Ehrlich, Jordan Newell, and I were talking about this on Friday's show. Now the right wing is trying to cancel Bill Burr for some of the jokes he made. Ooh, I like that we're cool again. That was Brett's point. You can check them out on Rebel Headquarters, another TYT channel on YouTube. And so look, anytime you're trying to shut down comedians, you're losing. So I hated Dave Chappelle's jokes about trans people because, and it's not because it was just about trans people or about those particular issues. Certainly I've had my fights in that category on all sides with the left wing, the right wing, etc. And even in the midst of all of that, I said, look, I think Ricky Gervais pulled it off pretty artfully and did a great job with similar jokes. Chappelle just got obsessed and it was like show after show and it was so boring. So on the other hand, I've loved Dave Chappelle in the past. So what do you do when you like some of his work and you don't like some of his work? Cancel. No, you don't cancel. Okay, so you don't like his trans jokes. We're all gonna live. He's not the president. He's not the commander in chief. And so you don't have to shut down everyone you disagree with. And it turns out you might wind up having interesting agreements. So now all of a sudden, we've got Steve Bannon saying, don't cut Medicaid, increase corporate taxes. I mean, if anyone deserves to be canceled, it's Steve Bannon. But even so, I say no. Why do I say no? Because look at him now turning around and potentially helping on those issues. I know. For some, no. Anyone who disagrees 1% or 50% or 95%, don't let them speak. Don't let them make jokes. Totally, utterly unacceptable. And by the way, who was doing cancel culture in this particular case? It wasn't the far left. It was NBC. It was Saturday Night Live saying, don't make jokes about trans people. And as we said, maybe it's because he just went so far on that and it's boring. I don't know, right? Even so, I'm against it. Let him make any jokes he likes, okay? But don't make jokes about Israel. Why? Is Israel the poor, powerless victim, arguably like trans people, and they really need, oh golly gee, if we could just find one person in favor of Israel on American television. I mean, this is absurd. Now we can't make fun of the powerful either. You see, once you start cancel culture, there's no end to it. And to be fair to the far left, cancel culture on Israel has been around as long as American media has been around. I mean, now you could at least criticize Israel in media to some degree. slightly under certain circumstances. For all my life, if you criticize Israel and American media, you are going to get fired. Period. So that cancel culture has been here forever. So let the brother make the jokes. And by the way, it's interesting too that the producers at Saturday Night Live I keep forgetting Dave Chappelle's Muslim, tell a Muslim man, don't you dare make jokes complaining about Muslims being slaughtered. Know your role. And that is a disgusting thing to say.
Yep. All right, Operation Joy is up next in our bonus episode, but there's a story that we didn't get to in the main show that we have to talk about, and it has to do with a man who wants to know whether dating women of color will advance his anti-racism. So we're gonna get into that and more. So.
Okay. God help us. All right. So, and start writing in now, all you members out there, on things that gave you joy, something else that someone else did that was beautiful in your life, something you did that you're proud of in your life. This is safe space, guys, where you can actually say things that are great about yourself or your family members or your friends, because we're trying to share in each other's joys. There's way, way too much depressing things in the world as things stand, so we try to lighten it up on Tuesdays. And the community's always had terrific stories. We'll do more of that. And by the way, we got an update on Phyllis. Is she going to be America's favorite pet? We'll show you that too. She's within our community as well. All right, hit the join button or tyt.com. We'll see you there.